Mom, use the back door tonight. Melissa doesn't want people thinking you live here. My son said it so casually that for a second I wondered if I had heard him wrong. I was standing on the front porch of the house where I had lived for 38 years, one hand still resting on the brass doorknob my late husband, Thomas, had polished every spring. Behind Ryan, I could see warm light spilling across the hardwood floor, hear glasses clinking in the dining room, and smell the rosemary chicken someone had ordered from the Italian place downtown. For unfamiliar cars filled my driveway. Through the window, men in sport coats and women in expensive dresses were laughing beneath the chandelier Thomas and I had chosen together when Ryan was still in middle school. I looked at my son. He was 42 now, taller than his father had been, wearing the same careful smile he used whenever he wanted something to sound reasonable. The back door. I asked that if you enjoy family betrayal stories, hidden wills, and mothers who finally receive justice, subscribe to EverNest Stories. More powerful stories are coming every day. Ryan glanced over his shoulder before lowering his voice. Just for tonight, Mom. Melissa has clients here. It would be awkward if they thought. He stopped. Thought what? I asked. His jaw tightened. That you live here. The words landed quietly. That almost made them worse. I had spent the afternoon with my friend Diane, drinking coffee at a little cafe about 3 miles away, talking about how strange life felt since Thomas died. I had come home expecting to heat soup, watch the evening news, and maybe sort through one more box of his books. Instead, my own son was standing between me and my front hallway as if I were a neighbor who had arrived at the wrong address. I didn't argue. At 70, I had learned that people often revealed more when you gave them silence. Ryan seemed relieved when I stepped back. Thanks, Mom, he said. I knew you'd understand. That was when I noticed the console table behind him. For nearly 4 decades, a framed photograph had sat there of Thomas and me on our wedding day. I was 24, wearing a simple ivory dress. Thomas looked terrified and happy at the same time. The photograph was gone. In its place stood a large silver frame holding a picture of Ryan and Melissa at some resort in Florida, both of them smiling into the sun. I looked at it for a moment. Ryan followed my eyes but said nothing. Then he gently closed the front door. I stood on the porch until I heard the lock click. No shouting. No tears. Just that small mechanical sound between me and everything I had once believed was secure. I walked slowly along the side of the house, past the hydrangeas Thomas had planted for our 40th anniversary, toward the back entrance near the mudroom. My key still worked there. Ryan had made sure of that. I put my hand on the knob but I didn't turn it. Instead, I reached into my purse and took out my phone. There was a number I had not called in almost a year. Rebecca Shaw had been Thomas's attorney for more than 2 decades. She had handled contracts, estate papers, and something Thomas once called the trust, though I had never paid much attention because I believed there would always be time to understand it later. There wasn't. I found Rebecca's name and pressed call. She answered on the 4th ring. Evelyn, she said, sounding surprised. I looked through the small window in the back door. From there, I could see Melissa crossing my kitchen carrying a bottle of wine as if she had always belonged there. I kept my voice steady. Rebecca, I said, I think I finally need to know exactly what Thomas put in that trust. For 11 weeks after Thomas died, I kept telling myself Ryan and Melissa were only trying to help. That was the story I repeated whenever something in the house felt different. Ryan had been the one to suggest moving in. He said he could not stand the thought of me being alone in a place that suddenly felt too large. Melissa brought groceries the first week and filled my refrigerator with things I had not asked for but appreciated anyway. Ryan mowed the lawn before I could call the service Thomas used. He fixed a dripping faucet in the downstairs bathroom and drove me to church one Sunday when my car battery was dead. In those first days I was grateful for every small kindness because grief had made ordinary tasks feel heavier than they should have. I did not notice the changes all at once. That was the clever part. One afternoon, Melissa moved my favorite chair from the living room to the upstairs guest room, because she said the space looked cleaner without it. A few days later, Ryan carried 3 boxes of Thomas's books down to the basement. You do not need to look at these every day, Mom, he said. I told myself he was right. Then my little writing desk disappeared from the den, and a second computer monitor appeared in its place. Melissa called it her temporary office. Temporary became a word I heard often. Temporary shelves. Temporary storage. Temporary changes to the kitchen. Somehow nothing ever moved back. The first time the front door lock failed to recognize my code, I stood there for nearly a minute pressing the same 4 numbers I had used for years. Ryan came downstairs when he heard me knocking. He opened the door and looked at the keypad. "We upgraded the system," he said. "I forgot to give you the new code." He handed me a brass key instead. It opened the back entrance near the mudroom. "This will be easier for you anyway." I remember turning that key over in my palm. It was smaller than the one I had carried for almost 4 decades. I did not say anything. A week later, Diane stopped by with banana bread. We were sitting at the kitchen table when a package arrived on the porch. Ryan brought it inside. I saw the shipping label before he carried it upstairs. Ryan Carter, homeowner. The word stayed with me long after the box disappeared from sight. Homeowner. That evening, I stood in the hallway looking at the framed family photographs while Ryan and Melissa talked in the kitchen. Melissa laughed and said something about finally replacing the countertops. Ryan answered, "Once everything settles, this place will work a lot better for us." Not Mom. Not the family. I began noticing how often they said it. Our kitchen. Our neighborhood. Our place. First, I thought I was being sensitive. Grief can make ordinary words feel sharper. Then Diane came over again one Saturday morning. Ryan met her at the door before I could. I heard him say, "Mom stays with us now, so we are trying to make things easier for her." I was standing 6 feet away in the hallway. I looked at him, waiting for him to correct himself. He did not. Diane glanced at me. Neither of us said a word. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I finally understood that Ryan and Melissa were no longer thinking of themselves as guests in my house. They had started thinking of me as a guest in theirs. After Diane left that morning, I stayed in the hallway for a long time, looking at the space where Ryan had been standing. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt arranged, managed, as if every room had slowly been reassigned without anyone ever asking me. Over the next few days, I began paying attention to details I had been dismissing. Melissa started leaving renovation catalogs on the kitchen counter, open to glossy pages showing white cabinets, marble islands, and oversized pendant lights. Ryan began measuring the dining room one evening with a tape measure. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled and said, "Just thinking ahead." I did not ask what he meant. I wanted to hear what people said when they believed I was not challenging them. 2 nights later, I found the thermostat set several degrees lower than I liked. When I changed it back, Melissa changed it again. She told me the house felt stuffy when clients visited. Clients. That word explained a lot lately. My home had become a place where I was expected to disappear whenever someone important came through the front door. The breakfast nook became my usual place in the mornings because Melissa liked to spread papers across the kitchen island. My coffee mug was moved to a lower cabinet because she said it made more sense there. Thomas's old chair had already been taken downstairs. Even the bowl where I kept my keys had disappeared from the entry table. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and realized my front door code still had not been restored. I stood on the porch holding 2 paper bags staring at the keypad. I could have called Ryan. Instead, I walked around the house and used the brass key he had given me. The back entrance opened into the mudroom beside the laundry area. I set the groceries down and noticed a pair of Melissa's shoes where Thomas used to leave his gardening boots. That small detail hurt more than I expected. Not because of the shoes, because I understood what they represented. Someone else had begun filling every empty space before I had even decided what I wanted to keep. Later that week, I heard Melissa speaking on the phone in the den. I was carrying folded towels upstairs when her voice drifted into the hallway. "Once everything is settled, we can finally make the downstairs feel like ours." I stopped on the 3rd step. She laughed softly. "No, she will be fine. Ryan says she barely uses half the rooms anyway." I did not move. I did not want the floorboards to creak. A moment later, she said, "The important thing is getting everything organized before she changes her mind." My hands tightened around the towels. Changes her mind about what? I stood there until Melissa ended the call. Then I continued upstairs as if I had heard nothing. That evening, Ryan came into the kitchen while I was washing a plate. Mom, we should probably start talking about simplifying things for you, he said. I turned off the faucet. What things? He leaned against the counter. The house. The bills. Paperwork. You do not need to be dealing with all of that now. He smiled, but his eyes did not. Let me handle it. I dried my hands slowly. Your father handled most of the paperwork, I said. I know, Ryan replied. That is why this is probably overwhelming for you. Overwhelming. I repeated the word silently. He thought grief had made me confused. He thought age had made me careless. He thought silence meant agreement. I looked at my son and smiled. I will think about it. Relief passed across his face so quickly he probably did not realize I saw it. That night, after everyone went upstairs, I opened the small drawer beside my bed where I kept Thomas's old business cards. At the bottom was one with a name I recognized immediately. Rebecca Shaw, attorney at law. I placed it on my nightstand and turned off the lamp. For the first time since Thomas died, I was not wondering what Ryan and Melissa planned to do. I was wondering how much they had already done. The next morning I called Rebecca before Ryan and Melissa came downstairs. I kept my voice low, not because I was afraid of them hearing me, but because I wanted one conversation in that house that still belonged entirely to me. Rebecca remembered me immediately. She asked how I was doing, and for a moment I almost gave her the answer everyone expected. Fine. Managing. Taking things one day at a time. Instead I said, I think Ryan is trying to take control of something Thomas left behind. There was a pause on the other end. Then Rebecca's tone changed. Evelyn, has Ryan asked you to sign anything since Thomas passed? I sat very still at the kitchen table. 3 weeks after the funeral, Ryan had brought me a folder while I was drinking tea in the den. He said it contained routine insurance papers and some forms that would make bill paying easier. I had been exhausted that day. I remember holding the pen, reading the first page twice, and realizing I could not focus. I told him I would look at it later. He had smiled, but it was not his usual smile. There is nothing complicated in there, Mom, he had said. I already went through it. I never signed. Then the folder disappeared. Yes, I told Rebecca. There was something. She asked me to find it if I could and meet her that afternoon. Before we ended the call, she said one more thing. Thomas was very deliberate about your protection. Do not sign anything until I see it. I looked around the kitchen after we hung up. The room carried too many memories of him. Thomas standing at the stove on Sunday mornings making pancakes that were always too large. Thomas reading the newspaper with his glasses halfway down his nose. Thomas complaining every winter that the back door let in a draft, then forgetting to fix it until spring. We had built our life through ordinary days, not grand gestures. 46 years of mortgage payments, grocery lists, school concerts, tax returns, vacations we saved for, and arguments we barely remembered afterward. Thomas had never been a suspicious man, but he understood money. He owned a small commercial landscaping company for 31 years, and he believed paperwork mattered because promises could be forgotten. I had teased him about it. You trust paper more than people, I once said. He had looked at me over his coffee and answered, No, I trust people. Paper just remembers what they promised. That sentence came back to me as I drove to Rebecca's office that afternoon. Her building sat near downtown, about 20 minutes from my house, in a row of older brick offices Thomas had visited many times. Rebecca met me in the lobby herself. She was 61, silver beginning to show at her temples, with the same calm expression I remembered from estate meetings years ago. In her office, she opened a thick file with Thomas's name on the tab. She did not rush. She showed me the trust documents first. The house had been transferred into the Carter family living trust years earlier. Thomas and I had been co-trustees. After his death, I became the sole surviving trustee. Ryan had no ownership interest in the property. None. I read that line twice. Rebecca let me absorb it before continuing. Then she asked again about the folder Ryan had given me. I described what little I remembered. Her expression tightened. Evelyn, if that document is what I suspect, it may have been intended to give Ryan authority over property he does not currently control. I thought of Melissa's renovation catalogs. The new lock. The word homeowner printed on Ryan's package. The way he had told me I was overwhelmed. Rebecca closed the file gently. Can you find that folder? I nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than confusion. I felt direction. I know exactly where I am going to look. I found the folder in the garage just after 9 that evening, tucked beneath a stack of old warranty manuals inside a plastic storage bin marked house papers. Ryan and Melissa were upstairs, and the television in their bedroom was loud enough that I could hear the faint rhythm of a game show through the ceiling. I carried the bin to Thomas's old workbench and turned on the small lamp above it. The light was yellow and weak, but it was enough. The folder was exactly as I remembered it. Blue cardboard. No label. No note. Just several pages clipped together inside. I sat on the wooden stool Thomas used whenever he sharpened garden tools and began reading slowly. The first page was ordinary enough. Insurance references. Utility information. Contact details. The second page was different. It described authority over certain property decisions and financial matters in language that looked simple until I read it twice. Then a third time. My name was printed near the bottom. Ryan's name appeared in the section identifying the person who would receive authority if I signed. I could almost hear him again. There is nothing complicated in there, Mom. I already went through it. I kept reading. The document would have given him far more control than paying electric bills or helping with paperwork. It would have allowed him to act on my behalf in matters tied to the house and other assets. My hands did not shake. I expected them to. They did not. I turned the next page and found something that Rebecca had not prepared me for. In the upper corner, written in blue ink, were 5 words in Melissa's handwriting. Once she signs, we can refinance. I knew her handwriting because she had left grocery lists on my refrigerator for weeks. The same rounded letters. The same long tail on the letter G. I stared at that sentence until the rest of the page blurred around it. Refinance. Suddenly the renovation catalogs made sense. The measurements. The conversations about countertops. Ryan calling himself the homeowner. Melissa telling someone they needed to get everything organized before I changed my mind. None of it had been random. They had been planning around a signature they assumed they could get from me. I took out my phone and photographed every page front and back. I photographed the handwritten note twice, once close enough to make every word clear and once showing its place on the document. Then I sent the images to Rebecca with a short message. Found it. She called less than 2 minutes later. Do not confront them, she said. And do not remove the original yet. I looked toward the garage door. Why leave it? Rebecca paused. Because right now they do not know you understand what it is. That matters. Thomas would have understood that answer. Information had value before people knew you had it. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I put every page back in the exact order I found it. I aligned the corners, refastened the clip, closed the blue folder, placed it beneath the same warranty manuals and returned the storage bin to the shelf. Nothing looked disturbed. Before turning off the lamp, I rested my hand on Thomas's workbench. There were scratches in the wood from years of projects, small marks he never bothered sanding away. I remembered him standing there once, telling Ryan as a teenager that rushing through a job usually meant doing it twice. I had not thought about that conversation in years. Now it felt strangely precise. When I went back inside, Melissa was in the kitchen pouring herself a glass of water. Everything all right? She asked. I smiled. Just looking for an old recipe. She nodded and turned away. I walked upstairs without hurrying. For weeks, Ryan and Melissa had mistaken my silence for confusion. That night, for the first time, I understood how useful that mistake could be. For the next several days, I changed nothing. That was harder than I expected. Once you understand that someone has been planning around you, every ordinary conversation feels different. Ryan still asked whether I had taken my vitamins. Melissa still left coffee in the pot for me. They were polite, almost kind, but now I could see the shape underneath it. I kept using the back entrance. I kept eating breakfast at the small table near the window, while Melissa spread renovation samples across the kitchen island. I listened when Ryan talked about replacing the old cabinets. I nodded when Melissa said the living room would look brighter with lighter furniture. I did not remind them that Thomas and I had chosen every piece in that room together. Silence was becoming useful. 2 mornings later, Rebecca called and asked me to come to her office. She had reviewed the photographs and the trust documents again. The house is protected, she told me. Ryan has no ownership interest, and you never signed the authority document. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Rebecca continued, if you want them to leave, we need to do this properly. No shortcuts. No emotional confrontation. That suited me. I had no interest in creating a scene. I wanted clarity. I wanted my home back. Rebecca prepared a formal written demand informing Ryan and Melissa that their permission to remain in the property was being withdrawn, and that they needed to make arrangements to leave within the period required by law. The language was calm, precise. Nothing in it sounded angry. That made it stronger. I signed where Rebecca indicated. 3 days later, the letter arrived by certified mail. Ryan was in the kitchen when he opened it. I was standing at the counter stirring cream into my coffee. Melissa came in halfway through the second page. What is that? She asked. Ryan gave a short laugh. Mom is trying to scare us. I kept stirring. Melissa took the letter from him and read faster. Her face changed before Ryan's did. This came from an attorney, she said. I can see that. Ryan leaned against the counter and looked at me. Seriously, Mom? I set the spoon down. Yes. He smiled in a way that reminded me of himself at 16, when he believed confidence could replace preparation. You are not actually going to make us leave. Picked up my cup. Rebecca will handle the paperwork. That was all I said. Ryan laughed again and tossed the letter onto the counter. You would never take your own son to court. The room went quiet. Melissa looked at him, then at me. I was standing about 6 feet away. I heard every word. I took one sip of coffee. You should read the whole letter, I said. Then I walked out of the kitchen. That afternoon, a contractor arrived to measure the countertops. Melissa had scheduled him before the letter came, and apparently decided not to cancel. I sat in the living room while he stretched a tape measure across the island and discussed white quartz options with her. Ryan talked about opening the wall between the kitchen and dining room. They behaved as if nothing had changed. As if the paper from Rebecca were an inconvenience that would disappear if they ignored it long enough. I understood then that their confidence was not based on facts. It was based on me. On the version of me they had created in their minds. A grieving 70-year-old widow who would complain quietly, then give in. They believed they knew my limit. That evening I called Rebecca from my bedroom and closed the door. They are not leaving, I told her. I expected that, she said. Then we moved to the next step. I looked at Thomas's photograph on my nightstand. He was smiling beside me on our anniversary trip to Charleston, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. For weeks I had felt like everything was happening too quickly for me to understand. Now the opposite was true. I understood exactly what was happening. Ryan thought I was waiting for him to make a decision. He had not realized I had already made mine. The next step came sooner than Ryan expected. Rebecca filed the necessary papers, and within days, he was served with formal notice that the dispute was moving forward. That was when his tone changed. The casual confidence disappeared first. Then came concern dressed up as concern for me. He started calling relatives. My sister-in-law Linda phoned one evening and asked whether I was feeling all right. A cousin I had not heard from in months sent me a message saying Ryan was worried I was making decisions while I was still grieving. Even Diane heard from Melissa, who told her I had become forgetful since Thomas died. I sat at my kitchen table reading those messages one by one. None of them accused me directly. They did something more careful. They suggested. They implied. They planted doubt. Ryan had realized he could not claim the house, so he began questioning whether I should be trusted to make decisions about it. The first time he tried that argument with me directly, he used a soft voice. Mom, nobody is saying you cannot handle things, he said. We are just worried this is a lot for you. Melissa sat beside him at the kitchen island with her hands folded neatly. You have been through so much, she added. Maybe this is not the right time to make major decisions. I looked from one to the other. Which decision worries you? I asked. Ryan hesitated. Forcing family out of the house. My house, I said. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Melissa looked down at the counter. Ryan exhaled slowly. See, this is what I mean. You are getting stuck on technicalities. Technicalities. 46 years with Thomas. Decades of mortgage payments. Property taxes. Insurance. Repairs. A trust prepared by an attorney. To Ryan, all of that had become a technicality because it stood between him and what he wanted. I did not argue. Rebecca had already told me not to. Instead, I began keeping records. Dates. Messages. Copies of emails. Notes about conversations. Rebecca obtained documents showing Ryan had discussed renovation estimates before he had any legal authority over the property. She also found messages he had sent to a lender asking general questions about refinancing a home held in a family trust. He had not completed anything, but the questions mattered. They showed he understood enough to know the house was not simply his. Then came the message that hurt more than the paperwork. Ryan had written to Melissa that I would eventually agree once everyone tells her this is too much to manage. I read that sentence in Rebecca's office. Once. Then again. I placed the printed page on her desk. He thought he could make me doubt myself, I said. Rebecca nodded. That is what it looks like. I stared out her window at the traffic moving along the street below. Cars stopped at the light, then continued when it changed. Simple rules. Clear signals. I wished families worked that way. What hurt was not that Ryan wanted the house. What hurt was that he had decided my age could be used as leverage against me. He remembered every birthday I had made special for him, every school event Thomas and I attended, every year we helped when money was tight. Yet now, at 70, my judgment had become inconvenient to him. That evening when I returned home, Ryan was in the living room talking quietly with Melissa. They stopped when I entered. I took off my coat and hung it where it had always belonged. Ryan watched me. Rebecca. Called my attorney, he said. So this is really happening. I looked at him. Yes. He waited for more. I gave him nothing. Then I walked past them, up the stairs and into my bedroom. For weeks, Ryan had been trying to prove that grief had made me uncertain. The truth was simpler. Grief had made me quiet. He had mistaken quiet for weakness, and now he was beginning to understand the difference. The hearing took place on a gray Tuesday morning, and I arrived at the courthouse 20 minutes early with Rebecca beside me. I had expected to feel nervous, but what I felt instead was strangely calm. For weeks, Ryan and Melissa had controlled the atmosphere inside my house. Every room had carried their assumptions. This building was different. Here, assumptions had to become evidence. Ryan arrived with his attorney a few minutes later. Melissa walked beside him in a cream coat, holding a leather folder against her chest. Ryan looked at me once, then looked away. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom while the clerk organized papers at the front. When Judge Patricia Monroe entered, everyone stood. She was composed, direct, and careful with every question. Rebecca presented the trust first. She explained that Thomas and I had established it years earlier and that after his death, I became the sole surviving trustee. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Ryan's attorney argued that Ryan had contributed to household expenses and helped maintain the property after Thomas died. Rebecca did not dispute that he had paid for groceries, utilities, and several repairs. She simply asked whether any of those payments transferred ownership. They did not. Then came the document Ryan had asked me to sign. Rebecca showed that it had never been executed. My signature was absent. The authority it described had never taken effect. The judge looked toward Ryan. Mr. Carter, did your mother ever transfer an ownership interest in this property to you? Ryan cleared his throat. Not formally. Judge Monroe's eyes remained on him. There is either a transfer or there is not. His attorney answered for him. There was no recorded transfer, Your Honor. Rebecca then introduced copies of the messages discussing refinancing and renovation plans. She did not exaggerate them. She did not need to. One message showed Ryan understood the property was held in a family trust. Another showed he expected me to agree once other relatives persuaded me that the house was too much for me to manage. I watched him while the judge read those words. His confidence had changed. It was not gone exactly. It had nowhere to stand. Then Judge Monroe turned to me. Mrs. Carter, is it your wish that your son and daughter-in-law leave the property? I looked at Ryan before answering. For one moment I saw the boy who used to leave muddy sneakers by the back door and ask me for pancakes after school. Then I saw the man who had decided my grief made me easier to move aside. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I want my home back." The judge nodded and continued through the legal findings. The trust controlled the property. I was the surviving trustee. Ryan and Melissa had no ownership interest, granting them the right to remain against my wishes. The court approved the next step in the possession process and ordered them to leave within the period specified in the written order. The clerk brought the documents forward after the ruling was entered. Ryan took his copy slowly. Melissa stared at the floor. I expected some dramatic feeling to rise in me. Satisfaction. Triumph. Something sharp. It did not. I felt tired, then relieved. Judge Monroe looked at Ryan one final time and said, "Mr. Carter, this property is not yours." No one spoke after that. Outside the courtroom, Ryan stopped near the elevators. "Mom," he said. I turned. His expression was different now. Not angry. Smaller. "You really went through with it." I looked at the papers in his hand. "Yes." Melissa pressed the elevator button. Ryan seemed to wait for me to explain myself, to soften what had happened, to make it easier for him. I did not. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Ryan looked at me until the doors closed between us. For the first time in months my son had nothing to say, and for the first time in months I did not need him to. Ryan and Melissa moved out 9 days later. There was no scene in the driveway, no raised voices, no final argument. A moving truck arrived just after 8 in the morning, and 2 men carried boxes through the front door while Ryan checked items off on his phone. I stayed in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and let the house empty itself around me. Every few minutes I heard footsteps overhead, drawers opening, closet doors closing. The ordinary sounds of people leaving a place they had once assumed would become theirs. Melissa came downstairs carrying the silver picture frame that had replaced my wedding photograph on the console table. She paused when she saw me. "We are almost done," she said. "All right," I answered. That was all. Ryan came down last. He had Thomas's old tool case in one hand. I looked at it. "That stays here," I said. Ryan glanced down as if he had forgotten what he was carrying. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he set it beside the stairs. "Fine." He walked toward the door, stopped and looked back at me. There were 100 things I could have said. I could have reminded him that I had changed his diapers in this house, helped him with homework at this kitchen table, waited up when he learned to drive, and stood beside Thomas at every important moment of his life. I could have asked when he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. I said none of it. Some questions do not become easier just because you ask them aloud. Ryan finally opened the front door. "Goodbye, Mom." "Goodbye, Ryan." The door closed softly behind him. I waited until the moving truck pulled away before I walked into the hallway. The house looked strange. Empty spaces remained where Melissa's furniture had been. Pale rectangles marked the walls where pictures had hung. The kitchen island was clear for the first time in months. I went to the basement and found my wedding photograph wrapped in an old towel inside a storage box. I carried it upstairs, cleaned the glass, and placed it back on the console table. Thomas was 26 in that picture. I was 24. We looked impossibly young. I touched the edge of the frame and smiled. Over the next few days I put things back slowly. My chair returned to the living room. My writing desk went back into the den. Thomas's books came upstairs one box at a time. I did not restore everything exactly as it had been. That surprised me. Some things needed to change because I had changed. I donated a few pieces of furniture, painted the guest room a soft blue, and moved my coffee mugs back to the cabinet I preferred. Then I called a locksmith. He arrived on Friday morning carrying a small metal case. "Which entrance do you want me to start with?" he asked. I looked down the hallway toward the front door. Sunlight was coming through the glass, stretching across the floorboards Thomas and I had refinished together years ago. "The front one," I said. He replaced the lock and handed me 2 new keys. I held one in my palm, heavier than the brass key Ryan had given me for the back entrance. That afternoon Diane came over with a lemon pie. The doorbell rang, and for one foolish second, I almost headed toward the mudroom out of habit. Then I stopped. I turned around. I walked through my own hallway and opened the front door. Diane smiled when she saw me. You look different, she said. Do I? She nodded. Lighter. We ate pie at the kitchen table and talked until the afternoon sun began to fade. Later, after she left, I stood alone in the entryway with my hand resting on the new lock. Ryan had believed dignity was something he could take from me by deciding which door I was allowed to use. He was wrong. The door had never really been the point. The point was remembering that I still had the right to open it. Subscribe to EverNest Stories for more emotional family betrayal stories, inheritance secrets, and mother's justice. And watch the next story on screen now.